Hi, so in this session we're going to be making croissants. So we're going to use the level 3 croissant dough today, because that's the one some of us have done in the lesson. We've either done that one in Practical Bakery. I'm going to make a full batch because obviously we're going to use half of this to make croissants, and then the other half we're going to make pan of raisin. So what I've done, I've got my flour, I've got my sugar and my salt into a bowl, and I'm using dried yeast, so I've used half the amount, and because I've used half the amount of dried yeast, when it comes to the milk, instead of heating it to 20 degrees C, I've heated it to 35 just to get that going. It's better if you have a warmer temperature of milk for activating dried yeast. Okay, so really nice and warm to get this going. So into the milk, I'm just going to leave that to hydrate for a minute and just get going and just start to bubble. So I've just left this just to hydrate just for a couple of minutes, get the yeast activated. So it's just ready to go. I'm now going to give this a really good mix. Make sure I wash all the outsides. Make sure you use a spatula because you want every single bit of this yeast. So just low to start, just to bring it together, and then I'll speed it up. So what I'm looking for here, this dough is going to be stiff. If you remember the main rules when you're making any kind of laminated dough, whether it's puff pastry, Danish pastry, or the croissant dough, is that the butter and the dough, the barrage and the trempe, they have to be the same texture. So if your dough is softer, slightly warmer, your butter needs to be softer and slightly warmer. If the dough is cold, it's hard, the paste is hard and cold, then the butter needs to be that same texture. If one's softer than the other, it will squidge out and you won't get the proper lamination. So, my dough has come together. It might be that the machine struggles with this, so what might be better is sometimes if you just finish it by hand, just to make sure it's fully come together and it's starting to be smooth. Stretch it, so I'm just starting to shape it into that rectangle. I can roll it out if I want to as well. But what I'm going to do, just put that onto there. I'm just going to spray oil a little bit. And now I'm going to put that in the prover for 25 minutes. So I'm now going to prepare the barrage, so or the butter, which is then going to be folded into the dough. So a couple of things. I'm making a full amount of creme patisserie today. You probably only need a half recipe. Okay, so I'm only actually soaking half the raisins of the recipe. So I only need to make 6. There'll be a few spare. But just got some boiling water here, and I'm just using that boiling water just to soak those raisins. Okay, just so they bump up a little bit and so they don't burn during cooking. So if I just take the butter out, it's important to use a boiling water for this. Don't just use water from the tap because it's more about accuracy and ease of working. So I'm just going to score it just to make it all a lot easier on myself. Going to lay them beside each other like this. So once I've got this ready, it depends on the recipe I was using. If I was using croissant recipe that is in your book for making the pan of raisin. It gets the dough cold before you start folding it. And if you're going to do that, then what you want is you want this butter to be nice and cold. Because of how this recipe works, it means that you want it to be slightly warmer. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to fold it over. Roll it back on itself, and now I'm just going to start nowhere near as loud at home, because when you're doing it on a nice solid bench it doesn't make this kind of noise. So now I've got my butter, it's completely rolled out, it's at that perfect temperature. So I'm just going to leave it just on the side here, and if it needs to I can always give it a little blast in the blast chiller. If it gets too soft, depends on how warm your kitchen is, and it's just judging the texture of your actual dough. So my dough is now puffed up, so if you can see already that's started to grow quite a bit in the prover, so I'm just going to take that out. So when I do this, it's just like doing puff pastry, anything. There's three ways that you can put the butter into the dough. So you can either do the book fold, you can do the letter fold, or you can do the envelope, which is the French technique. But the most important thing is looking at this, is that we make sure that the piece of dough is actually 50% bigger than what the original butter, or your piece of butter is. So I want to make sure it's about the same width. I don't want it to be. And we want this to be even all the way across. So I'm just going to start looking at this now. And already that's looking at about what I want it to be. Okay, so what I want it to do is be nice and square. I don't want this to be an odd shape. What I want is that the butter goes through in a good even amount, okay? If you've got patches where the butter doesn't cover all of it, as you're folding it, there's gaps in the lamination, things like that. So we just want to spend that time just making sure it's nice and accurate. So, good thing like this as well, by spreading this out, it's cooling it down a little bit. So I'm going to just look at that, and I'm just, it's about right. My butter's not really soft, it's still got a bit of firmness to it. And I'm just going to lay that in there with hardly any overlap at all, okay, if any. Knife. So, to the centre. It doesn't matter if the butter sticks out just slightly. You can see the butter through, and now I'm going to fold the side that's got the butter. So first side was no butter on it, second side had the butter on. I'm just going to fold that over. So it's nice and straight. So at this stage, just tuck it. Use your rolling pin just to tuck it about on all sides. I've got my butter now in there. I'm just going to put a little bit of flour on the bench, not too much. I just want a small dusting. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to push the rolling pin all the way along one way and then the other. And then I'm going to do the same here. It's just going to help that the butter spreads out an even amount. And now what I'm going to do is roll it lengthways. Okay, if you think that it's starting to misshape, just go back, turn it the other way. What I want to do is tuck this butter in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just roll that now to the centre. So where I've rolled it lengthways, roll it to the centre, and now I'm going to roll that one back in. Now, we've already got a good start to the proving process. Had 25 minutes. Now what we need to do is let this dough rest. So I'm just going to square it off again, make sure it's all nice and straight. And what I don't want to do is play with it too much. I just want to now let this rest. So I'm going to put that, it says to put it into the fridge for an hour. But this isn't about proving, this is about getting this cool enough. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in the blast chiller 30 minutes. So my dough's had half an hour in the blast chiller and it has cooled down considerably. I can see that it's still even proving while it's in the blast chiller, which of course is a good thing. Okay, it is a good thing because it wants to continuously prove. And when you're using dried yeast, you just need to get that a little bit warmer just to start with. Okay, so same technique. I'm going to push. So what I want to try and do is try and keep it straight as I can. Obviously, the inside will be softer than the outside. Turn it the other way. Just give it some little presses as it goes out. See, I'm hardly using any flour at all. I want it to stick together. You can see the butter as a layer right inside that that pastry inside that dough. Now what I want to do is fold that into three. So again, trying to keep those as straight as possible. So at this point, just give them a little pinch, just pinch it together a little bit if you can, just to try and hold it so it stays straight. Okay. So again, same, pushing with the rolling pin from the centre out. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, fold that again into the centre, again keeping it nice and straight, and then I'm going to fold that over again. So you can see already I've really stretch that dough out. Okay. Now what I'm going to do, just pinch it together. The more you roll this out, and I should have done it more on the first turn, but the more you roll it out, as you're chilling it, it's going to cool more evenly. If it's too big and chunky, it's going to cool on the outside, be soft in the centre, and what you really want is you want it nice and thin like this, especially by those final turns, so that now, when that cools, that's going to be nice and evenly cooled. You want the butter to be cold. And what I'm doing now, I'm just spending a minute just straightening it off. Okay, so my bread is proved, my dough is proved, chilled for another half an hour in the glass chiller, so it's nice and cold, it's set, it's rested, but I can see that there's a little bit of activity and it still wants to rise a little bit. So I've made a full batch here, and what I've worked out at about 60 to 70 grams for half of this dough, so I'm just going to cut it in half, should make you about 7 or 8 of each pastry at 60-70 grams. So already now I can look in there and I can see lots of lamination. Okay, look at those lines. Okay, so good. I'll try and take it back. There you go. So lamination, and you can see butter, but very, very thin layers. There is a little bit of a lump there, a tiny bit there, but generally lots and lots of layers in the lamination. And what I'm going to do is quickly roll out from the centre out, and roll out to make my pan of raisin. So again, trying to keep it as square as possible. This is a bit like when I've done cinnamon rolls or Chelsea buns with you. Exactly the same process. Spread that on, and just like if I was doing a cinnamon roll or a Chelsea bun, I don't want to put that filling right up to the top. Okay, I want to leave a little gap. I'm now going to sprinkle the raisins over there evenly. It's soaked in the boiling water, just so they don't burn. And then as well, what I'm going to do, once I've finished making, getting them improved, I'm then going to have a look at my syrup to put onto my pan of raisin to finish. There's a recipe in your recipe book as well. So I'm just going to roll that up now. I'm just going to wet my fingers. I've got still a little bit of water left in the raisins, just to help me, and I just want to pinch that a little bit if I can. And what I'm going to do, in half again, half again. Just going to squidge it down. My pan of raisin. And now I'm just going to cling film those over, spray oiled them. I don't want it on there tight. So from the centre out, let's try and keep it as rectangular as possible. Need be just the tiniest bit of flour. We don't want lots of flour on the bench. try and get 7 out of this, so it's halfway. Scoring. So just spend your time just scoring the dough, just to make sure you get the right amount. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stretch the dough a little bit. Going to give it a little nick in here, just so as I roll it, I'm pushing it outward slightly. Just going to roll up those corners so I get a nice clean edge to those corners. And now I'm just going to start to roll it up, keeping it quite tight. And then into that crescent shape. Okay, so as you can see, if I wanted to, I could have them slightly shorter and wider. It's completely up to you, exactly how you want them shaped. So, just going to stretch this one out again. Sides, going to give it that little nick, stretch it at the front. So, got that little bit of filling, just a teaspoon in there. Again, roll it so we tuck in those corners. Try and keep it quite tight. There's a little bit of egg wash underneath, just to hold it in shape. And these ones, I'm going to keep them straight. Another one there. And once I've got these all egg washed, what I'm going to do, I've got some almonds here that I'm going to put on, and then they'll go ready into the prover. So it's been 40 minutes, and amazingly they're already, the pan and raisin are already proved enough. So if I can just show you up close, you can see they're ready. I can see the lamination in them. I cooked mine for 10 minutes with the Dutch oven, and then 5 minutes just dry heat. And what that's done is that's let them really plume up and rise. And then after that, just taking off, going to a dry heat, 180 for 5 minutes. And what that's done is that's allowed them to really crisp up. So I'm going to bring one up just for you to have a look at, so you can see. Got that lamination there, as you can see on the croissant. The pan and raisin, I've also just, they're lovely and soft, but what I've done is I've just put a little bit of the syrup on from the recipe, just sprinkled, just basted a bit of that on, and now what I'm going to do is just give them that light sprinkle, just to help finish them off a little bit better. They have opened up a little bit. I could have got a better pinch on them when I was rolling them up. It's quite tough because the pastry's quite hard and dry. There we go. So I've cooled these so I can pick the 6 best ones. So I'm now just going to put those onto the board, like so. So there's our croissants, good lamination, they're nice and crispy. The almond croissant, and then we've got these pan and raisin. the end bake. I've done 180 full steam, but with a Dutch oven, so the lid over, the gastro over, for 10 minutes, and then I've taken the lid off, taken out the steam, and another 5 minutes just to crisp, and then the almond filling that I used.